When you add be you plus live your purpose, what do you get? Joy. That's the motto of Unstuck Joy with Vicki Todd. Vicki believes you were born with gifts that you're meant to use to make the world a brighter place. Have you ever wondered, is this all life has to offer? There must be more. If you answer yes, then Unstuck Joy is the show for you. Each show will feature a memoir artwork painted by Vicki that taps into universal themes of evolution, hope, inner strength, and self-growth. Vicki will also ask listeners to play along. Draw, doodle, collage, write, and/or paint your way to soul clarity with Art Vision Journaling. Unstuck Joy will compel you to tune into your soul's whispers to realize your unique dreams. Get ready to get unstuck.
Hey everybody, welcome to Unstuck Joy, the art of living on purpose. I'm your host, Vicki Todd, and we come to you each first and third Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And this is the place where we give you tips and an art vision prompt that you can do at home to help you evolve ever closer to your true self and live unstuck joy. I'm so excited to talk to my guest today, Leah Guy. Leah is an intuitive healer, a spiritual teacher, and she's written this beautiful book, The Fearless Path, a radical awakening to emotional healing and inner peace. And Leah has used her own personal experiences of processing through addiction and eating disorders and rape and just stress. And she uses those to teach us how to process our own trauma and fear and come out on the other side to happiness and peace. And so welcome, Leah. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, before we get started, I want to let everyone know what I'm doing today with the Art Vision prompt. And so today's prompt is, how do you process? Because we all process through these things differently. And so this one is called, How Do You Process? If you go to my website, vickiworldart.com, there's a link in the menu called Art Visioning. Underneath that is Art Vision Prompts. How do you process is this one. You can find instructions. And so what I've done is I have a body here because I've been working on painting body prints. And so this is a body print representing me going through a negative experience or hard emotions. And even though I don't always perceive it, I am connected to my soul, even if I can't see it all the time. And so the black is having those really heavy emotions. But if we allow ourselves to kind of see the lesson, we can learn things and kind of blooming through some of these hard experiences. My process is doing art and writing that helps me kind of work through things. And once I keep working through and processing, eventually I come out on the sunny side of my soul, and that's where I can feel that peace and that unstuck joy. So I'm going to do a slightly different version today, and we'll revisit it at the end of the show. So Leah, you talk about in your book, The Fearless Path, that kind of the buzzwords today are just let it go or detach from it. And you say that's really not the best way to achieve good emotional healing. And so can you talk to us about that?
Sure. Well, I guess the bottom line of it, or the quick answer is the idea of letting go feels, it feels like a route that would alleviate some of our pain and suffering, and no one wants to go through that. So
right.
Everyone for kind of a quick way out, But the truth is that there's really no place to go other than through and within. And so this idea of letting go, people just start creating a new anxiety and spinning their wheels of how to actually let go. Where do you put the stuff, And the idea of attachment just keeps us away from our own sense of our heart, from our own compassion, from our grief, from our love, from experiencing everything that we need to experience to go through the process of healing. So I think it's just kind of a shortcut that doesn't work. And if it did work, all of us would be in a much better place. But the idea that, just being able to detach from something and it not hurt us anymore is just not a reality.
Right, because you say that with that detachment, that in the moment may seem like the best idea, really that's detaching us from our soul and from feeling that. And so we have to go through those emotions because our soul works through feelings and emotions. And so I really loved how you talked about our core pillar.
Yes.
Yeah, because it reminded me of that painting by Frida Kahlo that, her spine is the broken pillar after she had gone through the accident and so many surgeries. But I loved how you said that each experience, the good, the bad, the ugly, if we'll process that and own it, basically, then each thing is another layer on the pillar that makes us stronger.
Right. And so what most people are trying to do is fragment themselves even more by this idea of detachment. And then they wonder why they feel weak or unstable or anxious or fearful or generally, just not connected to who they are and what they want in their life anymore. And that's why, you
Right.
keep whole and be separate at the same time.
Yes.
So it hurts to go through the healing process, and we know exactly when it's going to be over. And I'm the first one to tell you, someone might call me a crybaby, but for me, I need the emotion and the tears and the movement to be part of my process. So I allow it and talk about it and move through it. And it doesn't feel good for me either, but it's the way for me to get somewhere else,
Right, right. And that is so true because I went to the Women of Wisdom conference in Seattle this weekend, and we were talking about that, going through these emotions and through this process to get to the other side, it's hard and it's sad and it wears you out. But, I think of people in my life who do that detachment and, try to let it go. And they think kind of on the outside, they're doing okay, but you can see, they're not really tapped into true happiness.
Well, or they start to accumulate other issues like insomnia or anxiety or overeating or overshopping. Right. We're going to go somewhere with the feeling. So it's either through that pain or it's going to come out in some other kind of form that often isn't that healthy for us. And then and everyone's confused of why do I have this problem or issue or discord in my body or experience. So
right. And so I'm sorry, what?
Well, we're going to have it one way or the other. It's either, go through the emotional part of it or go through, it's almost like a slow burn on the other side, whether it becomes, an unhealthy characteristic or activity or something that we're involved in.
Right. That's so true. Well, you talk about not post-traumatic stress disorder, but post-traumatic emotional disorder. And so what is that and who would that affect?
Well, I think we all have post-traumatic emotional disorder to some degree. So the basic difference is PTSD, we've come to think of it as something that happens with severe trauma or like in war or some like the gun shootings at schools and that kind of thing. Yeah. Those cause PTSD. But a lot of us have kind of an ongoing or unresolved issues from feeling emotionally pained and wounded that we haven't dealt with, especially from our childhood. And we don't have the coping skills or we don't have the environment or the knowledge of how to process and move through our experience. And so it accumulates in us. And then years later, weeks later, months later, but it's often years later, when we come to a certain kind of maturity, then we realize, I don't feel quite right. I don't feel safe. I don't feel visible. I don't feel worthy. And all these things come up and they start to affect our jobs and our relationships and our friendships and so forth. And that's that kind of, vague sense of emotional disorder, what I would call, because we're just functioning really in a survival state that doesn't include our best wellness. It's
right.
Just, when we get triggered with the emotional triggers, but there's not one particular stressful event that happened.
Right. So accumulation and kind of sweeping it under the rug, and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't feel right. What's going on?
Yeah, but even the sweeping under the rug comment, I understand. I agree. As adults, we do that, but when we're children, we don't know what we're doing. It's too much for children to process or know how to deal with.
Right.
Being bullied or abused or ignored or going through a parent's divorce or feeling unloved and that kind of thing. A child doesn't know how to sweep it under the rug. They just become frozen in essence, but still left with the same condition of an emotional disorder that years later they'll start to wake up to and then think something's wrong with their life. I think we need to educate people that there's nothing wrong with you, but we need to look at where the wounds are and then how can we address those wounds.
Right. Well, you mentioned the word trigger, and I thought this was such a useful um, idea, the difference between trigger and emotion. And so, because you say that something may have happened 10 years ago, and it can trigger. And I think the example you used was if you had a boyfriend and he cheated on you with your best friend, and 10 years later you smell her perfume, and it's like, oh, I remember that. But we don't have to automatically get into the emotion of anger and resentment. And so, talk about that. How can we discern between?
Well, we all have those triggers that come up, and some people don't call them that, but a lot of us do. And really, it's just the awareness. And once you have the awareness that something that might, affect you, that the awareness is that you're reacting to the trigger. You're not reacting to the present moment. And this is where mindfulness becomes very helpful, and it's very difficult. We all get involved with our knee-jerk reactions and reactions to the triggers and so forth, because it immediately jolts us back into the pain. But if we can become aware enough and know that this is about that pain, this isn't about how I am right now.
Right, right.
My brain moment of really sensory, like get into your body, notice where you are, come from a place of a response instead of reaction. And that's how you know the difference of an emotional response versus a reactionary trigger.
Right. Well, we need to go to a break really quickly. Give everybody your website and how they can get in touch with you, what you offer, your book. I think you have some chakra meditation CDs to give away today. So how can they get in touch with you?
At modernsage.com, or my name, which is leahguy.com, LEAHGUY.com. And I have courses on a daily Om. There's on iTunes, my meditation CDs. The book is available on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Target online, and a lot of other stores, and also Audible. So it's, if you search, you'll find it. That's for sure. It's
okay.
Chakra meditations.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a quick break, everybody. This is Unstuck Joy. I'm your host, Vicki Todd. We're talking to Leah Guy, and we'll be right back. Hey everybody, welcome back to Unstuck Joy. I'm your host, Vicki Todd, and we are talking to intuitive healer and author Leah Guy. So in her book, The Fearless Path, Leah uses the chakra system for each chapter. And so can you explain to us what the chakra are and what they do?
Sure. That's a big
That's a big question.
Time we have left. But in general, I use that layout to give some framework to basically the main ways that we suffer and process emotions. Mm-hmm. And the reason I did is because the chakras are very helpful for me anyway to understand and have a subtle awareness and relationship to what goes on emotionally and physically in our bodies and our lives. So, right. We talk in the Western civilization here, we talk a lot about the 7 main chakras, which I'm sure people have seen in their pictures of a meditating person or yoga, Buddha, that kind of thing. But there's in fact over 100 chakras in the body, and they're just energy vortexes that are measurable and that rotate and spin, just like all things have energy and movement. Right. And so we experience life in our emotions, the food we eat, the people we're around, our environments, our mental intake and so forth. Affected, just like all things are affected in our body. So it's basically like another layer of ourselves that is, creates the energy system. And a lot of even Eastern medicinal practices use the chakras and or energy system to help diagnose. And that's what I do as well. So I look at the energy along with emotion and mind to see a person's wellness overall. It's a safe way to work with our health for people that have been abused or traumatized in any kind of way, and they may not like physical touch or that kind of personal invasion. But essentially, so the 7 main chakras, they all coordinate to a different part of our body, starting at our root chakra, going up to our crown chakra, and each one governs different organs and aspects of our physical self and our emotional parts of ourself. And there's different emotions that can get trapped and blocked in these areas. And that's what starts to create imbalance. It's not just imbalance in the chakras, and the chakras don't cause us to be sick or imbalanced, but it's the imbalance of our whole being. So if we're emotionally stuck or detaching and not in the flow of our emotional health, whether it's dealing with grief or pain or anger or bliss or joy or safety or whatever the emotion is, then our mind kicks into either survival mode, fight or flight, our adrenals get involved, our hormones get involved, our whole physical body gets involved with the emotion that we're experiencing or the one that we're trying to block, causing excess stress and excess overload in our bodies. And we can see that in the energy system, and we see it, how it starts to impact our physical health and our emotional health. So I don't know if you want specifics on each.
Yeah. Well, because what I really liked, each chapter deals with a different chakra. So you go up from, the ruby root chakra all the way up to the crown with each chapter. And it had a list of physical symptoms and emotional symptoms that if you're kind of blocked or detached or whatever emotionally, you may not have all of those symptoms, but in each list I could pick out at least something. It's like, oh, that's why that's happening. So yeah, just pick a chakra or two, and if you could kind of give an example of what's happening, and if you're detached, what that means physically and emotionally.
Okay. Well, so as you said, each chapter, each chapter has its own list, so people can kind of flip through easily if they're looking for.
I think we have a frozen internet over there. Okay, I think we lost Leah, so we'll go to, oh, is she back? Okay.
I'm back.
Are you with it? Okay, cool. So you were just starting with an example of one of the chakra chapters.
Yeah, so let's talk about the second chakra, for example. The second chakra is between the belly button and the groin area, so in that lower belly area.
Right.
That's the sacral chakra. A lot of people think of this as the sex chakra, but it really is a lot more than that. It has to do with our relationships to our family lineage. It has to do with our creativity, of course, procreation, intimacy, sexuality, all of that is included. But it often, for a person, it's what I call, too, in the book, the feeling center. It's where a lot of our emotions are stored and processed, just like the food, as we take it in. As we digest it and work through it, it enters into this lower belly chamber to be either utilized in our body process or to move on along out of our bodies. And so this feeling area it's really important for passion, for getting in touch with, our soul work and what we're doing here, and what turns that connection to our soul and pain and to our lover and to ourselves, and really that deep intimacy and that vulnerability with ourselves. And so the emotion that blocks this area a lot of times is guilt, and that feeling of over responsibility. It usually often can start when we are young. If we felt like we had to parent our parent, if we feel responsible for a divorce or breakup or for a death in the family, if one of our siblings or parents struggling with mental illness or depression or something, we take on this idea of, if I could have done something better, or it's because of me that I'm not X, Y, or Z enough. And there's this really deep sense of guilt or dissatisfaction with who we are that plays into this energy center, this feeling center. And so we start to detach and pull away from feeling safe and being vulnerable and being connected to our carnal desires and our sex drive and our desire to procreate, not just babies, but also art and music and life and dreams. And so that fire kind of goes out for a lot of people. And it also goes out as we age, oftentimes, because we lose touch with, we either get stale in our relationships, we stop working on our deep interacting in those deep, passionate ways. And we store a lot of energy here around our hips, around, a lot of people that suffer with trouble eliminating in their digestion, like with constipation and so forth. These are all symptoms of the stuck energy. And so we get expansive here. We start holding it all instead of letting things process through and staying fluid. and moving and being free and being vulnerable and being soft and sexy and into that aspect of, putting forth life essentially.
Right.
So sacral chakra.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I find it comforting, when I see this list of if, this particular chakra is blocked and you explain where it is in the body and the color and, aromatherapy that goes along with it, in each chapter. But if I look at the physical list or the emotional list and I can pick out, one or two, that's kind of comforting to me to know that there's really not something quote unquote wrong or that I need to, rush out and take a certain medication, but maybe just working through some of the feelings like you just talked about, maybe somehow working through the guilt or saying, I need to tap into my creativity or my sexuality or whatever. And that can, kind of be that switch that makes it better.
Back into balance, and that's what everything, it's an imbalance. It's the same thing when we have irregular cells in our body, with cancer and so forth. Some people, and I won't go so far to say, fix this and that will go away too, but just emotionally, if you feel emotionally unstable or mentally unstable or not grounded or not connected or not in the kind of life that you want to have for yourself, then it is our responsibility. That's where the emotional maturity comes in, is, being willing to process, but also being willing to own and understand what our place is in our own life and what we can do for ourselves.
Right, right. And one of the workshops I went to this weekend was the myth of the Spider Woman and how just tweaking our web with just one little thing can change. And so what I'm hearing you say is just, maybe by just changing one little thing in my diet or the way that, I exercise, maybe that one little tweak can lead to better balance or, being not quite so disconnected.
I mean, everything shifts, everything. And that's the other thing to note. It's not like the chakras are a set system. There's different, the energy moves constantly, like emotions should move regularly. Right. We're afraid of it because we get very comfortable in a certain way, and if we change that, then we don't know what to expect from there. So
and that's one phrase that I like that you said was, instead of let it go, let it change, and then just let down that resistance. And sometimes that's the hardest thing for people, is to say, okay, change, I know you're coming, and just kind of go with the flow of that.
Even when we don't feel well, we still don't want it to change. We're more afraid of something unknown and new than feeling bad, So, but we have to come to that realization, though.
Yeah. And I also like how you said, because we always hear that, there's only two emotions, fear or love, and everything is kind of packed, underneath those two buckets. And so sometimes I think when I'm in fear, I think, oh, that's wrong, that's bad, get out, move toward love. But I like how you said that fear is actually a warning bell that change is needed. So it's kind of a, positive twist on, oh, okay, I'm feeling fear, instead of like, oh, no, I shouldn't think that, that's wrong. Okay, how can I tweak that?
Yeah.
So,
like, what is it telling me?
Yeah. Well, give us your two websites one more time, and people can get in touch with you.
It's modernsage.com or leahguy.com. LEAHGUY.
Okay. And you have two chakra meditation CDs?
I have one CD. Yeah.
One CD. Okay.
There's 7 meditations on the CD.
Okay.
And there's a course on daily Om available now, about 21 days from fear to freedom, which is a nice course to take that's affordable and you can do on your own time. And then I also, on the website, people will see I work with people independently online as well, like through Skype.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to take another quick break. This is Unstuck Joy. I'm your host, Vicki Todd. We're talking to Leah Guy, and we will be right back. Hey everybody, welcome back to Unstuck Joy. I'm your host, Vicki Todd, and we are talking to author and spiritual teacher, intuitive healer, Leah Guy. And so in her book, the Fearless Path. We were just talking about that each chapter deals with a different chakra, and how if we have disconnected emotions or feelings, that can kind of tip the balance of our physical and emotional states. But also in each chapter, Leah has what she calls emotional workouts. And so it's kind of little tips based on each chakra of how we can gain more balance. And so if you could give us maybe a couple of examples of, different chakra, and maybe what an emotional workout would be to help us in that particular area.
Okay, sure. Well, the emotional workouts, like you said, they're very similar to physical workouts, just to keep us involved and healthy and practiced and using our emotions. So some of them are very hands-on. They're not all like this cathartic emotional blah.
Yeah.
That some feel like we just don't want to do that, So I try to create very practical things that anyone can do. Like if you're feeling ungrounded and feeling unsafe and having a lot of anxiety and fear, then that's usually a root chakra or a second chakra issue.
Right.
Some people get very in their head, their mind takes over their thoughts, and it kind of dominates their life with anxiety and worry and trying to over control their life, that kind of thing. So a person needs some help getting stabilized. And simply, a lot of people recommend nature, but I think even further, like getting your feet into connection with sand, with dirt, taking a sea salt bath with your feet. Even if it's, in the nice weather and you can find a new baby green leaf, putting it between your foot and the sock in your shoe, and staying really connected to nature that way. Also using our hands to feel things. So often we don't touch anybody or ourselves. We do this very either no touching or very light disconnected touching, but really get your palm engaged on a safe person, your friend or your family member or your lover, and just really connect with them fully and give a full hug, or touch the concrete wall, something to get connected back into your body and with something else. So those are just a couple of tips for the root chakra to get stable.
Right. And we were just talking about the sacral chakra before, the orange chakra between your belly button and genital area with creativity and sexuality. And I love that you had, I think, wasn't that the one where you had the cat-cow exercise?
Move the cat-cow to open up and free the low back. A lot of times sacral energy, we get stuck in our hips with a lot of fear, inability to move forward, that kind of thing. Our low back starts hurting and we don't feel able to, stand tall and be free to hold ourselves in, breathe down into your belly. And so the cat-cow, a lot of yoga positions are very good. And yoga is for meditation and the chakras and freeing ourselves. So that's an excellent one. Also, eating foods that help either soften or stimulate the energy. So you mentioned orange. A lot of people recommend eating peppers, mild peppers like orange peppers, that kind of thing. Lentils, different, the food, the color to work more with like the color therapy, and also what's soothing for our digestive system in the second and third chakras in particular. So we can fire that up a little bit, get it motivated, and like chili hot peppers and things if it doesn't upset your tummy, or we can cool it down some and give it some more earthy, kind of real grounded foods, from root vegetables, beets, turnips, that kind of thing.
Right. And I can't remember exactly which chakra it was, but you had one of the emotional workouts about suffering, and to kind of label the emotion that we're feeling, and then turn that around and write down, okay, what would be the antidote, almost the opposite to that. Can you remember which chakra that was for?
I don't remember actually. No, but I lead a meditation often when I teach classes like that, because our emotions are so closely related, and so I like to think of them as being on the same piece of paper, but the front and the back. It's like if you're experiencing pain, on the other side, it's very likely that you're experiencing love, because only from the love do we feel the pain, or from the desire or the want or the dream, or what have the connection over here, and we're feeling pain from the disconnection and the loss. And so we need to honor both sides of that. It's never just one element, that we wouldn't be able to experience that part of our emotion if we didn't have the opposite. So it can be very healing to get a different perspective.
Right.
And that's part of that ownership of accepting the love as well as accepting the suffering.
Yeah, and I thought, if I'm going through an emotional time, it would be so easy to label that I feel sad, I feel regret, I feel, jealousy, I feel whatever, but then to say, okay, what's on the other side of that paper? What's the antidote to that? Like, oh, okay. So it kind of gives me a path, to say I'm not stuck here. And so, kind of that accountability that, oh, I have a choice. I can
Right.
make it the fork in the road.
Well,
Um,
saying, oh, I'm going to think positive today. I mean, positive thinking is nice and wonderful, but we also have to really, be authentic and
right.
truthful about what we are experiencing.
Right. Well, I have to tell you a little anecdote. On the day that I was reading the chapter, I think it was about the solar plexus, the yellow chakra, that's your power center. I had mentioned to you during the break that I've started writing monologues to go with some of my artwork and performing those at open mic nights. And that has been a process to where I am feeling it in my power center and just like, yes, I'm really not just having fun with it, but that's a new power for me to feel it from there. And I was on such a high. And then the next day, I was like, I feel kind of like, was that okay? And I was reading that chapter and it was talking about shame. And I thought, oh, and so then that made me kind of go back and think, yeah, that's kind of the environment that I grew up in with my family was, stand out, shine, but don't shine too much, still kind of conform. And I think I was not used to that power center and just really stepping into that and then thinking, oh no, did you say too much? But when I recognized that, and with reading your chapter especially helped me recognize shame, I thought, oh, okay, let go, just don't go back to that old space or kind of that trigger in the emotion. What else can you do? So I thought that was such a neat way to look at it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good awareness for sure. I mean, we all have that is when we start transitioning and transforming and shifting into something new, we're always going to be reminded. I mean, and that's part of our growth. That's part of our evolution, in my opinion. We can't just, abandon the feeling of I'm unlovable or I'm not worthy enough or I should hide underneath a cloak. We don't abandon that. We use that and it becomes part of our delivery, but we don't have to be in the shame of it. We can be in the healthy shame and also in our center of this is who I am,
Right.
And that when you feel that, it feels like power, but it also just feels very connected, like this is who I am.
Yeah. And like you said, sometimes people are afraid of the freedom. And because if it feels kind of itchy and weird and, kind of different because we're not used to it, it is kind of like, oh no, that was wrong. So I'm going to kind of go back in my shell. But I love that a lot of what you say in the book, it really is taking accountability or at least having the awareness. And then we have a choice of which direction we're going to go in.
Right.
So with the emotional workouts in each chapter, you also talk about spiritual mapping. And this was a really cool process. And so, can you describe what spiritual mapping is and how that works?
Sure. Well, I designed the spiritual mapping technique in my workshops. It's a little easier to explain when you have a whiteboard, but anyway,
Yeah.
it's essentially a process that we take ourselves through to release blame from others about where we are in our life. So if we're unhappy in a certain place in our life, in our relationship, in our job, or what we're accomplishing or not, we start with the heart place, and then we create a map essentially, and then we put a spot where we're struggling right now, and then we kind of find the key points between the heart place, which was our desire to get married, become a freelancer, take this job, do this route or whatever. And from that place, generally we take steps towards our desired goal. At
Right.
some point between our heart and the place we are now, it's often times that we find people make a decision that's based on fear that takes them a little bit askew. So they kind of go off of their path a little bit. And when they make a decision based on fear, such as I'm really miserable in this job right now because the way my boss teaches me, and I haven't gotten promoted in 5 years, and this isn't what I set out to do exactly. I took and we look back and we say, well, you took the job because it was in line with your degree or with what you wanted to get towards in the future. And at some point, you've settled or you've made a decision to stay there because you were afraid that you didn't have what it took to go another direction or send out your resume, or that you weren't good enough to do the thing that you really want to do. So you made a decision to stay. And then from that point, all the other decisions are based on that fear point. So it just helps us to identify where we're, misstepped off of our heart trajectory, and how to release the blame from the thing that's bad in our life and go back to the point where we made that decision and then make a new decision. So ideally, it's a constructive kind of process where we can go a different direction.
Right. And that's what I liked about it is, again, that accountability thing and really an awareness thing. Because if I see that, oh, I took this job at the time and it was kind of a fear thing, and I felt like that's the best I could get, and I'd really like to be over here, but I'm afraid I can't accomplish that, then it kind of gives you the awareness that why did I take those steps, or why am I not taking other steps? And instead of saying, oh, poor me, or blaming it on someone else, it really is an accountability to take responsibility for, oh, here's where I am and why, and now go from there to find steps to move forward.
It always bring you back to the core issue of I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm not safe, whatever the core issue is. And that's where we have to keep returning to evolve and heal,
Right, right. And it takes courage, to be able to look at ourselves that clearly. It's really holding the mirror up. So spiritual mapping, yeah. I'm sorry, say that again.
So that's what the fearless path is there's no one that can be without fear, but it's at least having the courage to show up to yourself.
Right, right. I love that. Well, we need to take one more quick break, and we will be right back. You're listening to Unstuck Joy. I'm your host, Vicki Todd. We're talking about all things fearless with Leah Guy. We'll be right back. Hey everybody, welcome back to Unstuck Joy. I'm your host, Vicki Todd. We are talking to author Leah Guy with her beautiful book, The Fearless Path. And so we've been talking about the different chakra and emotional workouts and the spiritual mapping techniques that you have in your book. So you also talk a lot about meditation. And we all know that meditation relieves stress and, relaxation. But how does meditation help us on this journey of emotional healing?
Well, I think the more that we can go within ourselves, even if a person is averse to meditation, because it can feel overwhelming, I think, for people to carve out that time. But even, stillness, quietness, to allow some space and breathing space between you and all the distractions of your life so that we can listen. A lot of people just aren't listening to what's going on inside themselves. And so they just keep distracting and moving about. And so meditation or mindfulness is a way that we can get still enough to listen and hear of, just like we were talking about earlier, these deep-seated wounds that we may have, or the joys that we're afraid to feel. So many people are equally afraid to feel the happiness and the relief and move on in their life and so forth. So the more we can cultivate a relationship with our inner self, then the more we'll have less reliance on the external world to tell us how we are.
Right, right. And you call that soul signs. And so, if you're not sleeping well, or, you're feeling agitated or whatever, that's a sign that, maybe stop, drop, and listen, through meditation.
Right. And or, some people do it in walks with nature. You can meditate in a million different ways. And that's the thing. I try to encourage people. I don't sit with my legs crossed and my, fingers together in this big Zen state for 20 minutes every day. I do a few minutes of that. I do yoga. I do quiet walks. I do sitting and contemplate it. I do, a lot of different things throughout the whole day where I try to stay connected to myself and give myself some space between whatever the stress is or whatever the work is and who I am. So it's helpful. It's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I'm the same way. It's really hard for me sometimes to have that 20 or 30 minutes of okay, I'm going to dedicate it to just sitting here and being quiet. But there are many other ways. And I'm getting more into yoga, and that's such a great way to breathe. Because
Right.
sometimes, I'm not breathing by the end of the day. And
Yeah.
so, but just little things like that, it can help a lot.
Yeah.
Um, well, you talk about, the difference between emotional health and mental health. And so, what is the difference between those two?
Well, they're very closely related, but I want to distinguish the difference just because there's more and more, thankfully, more and more attention given to mental health, which is necessary and very needed in our society, especially now with everything that's going on. But the emotional aspect of that is equally as important. And the whole idea, I know many of us are aware that we there's been no pamphlet, there's been no education for people, and for most of us, we grew up in households where our parents worked. We didn't have a lot of processing time or downloading time with
Right.
people. We were told, to suck it up and move on and, just
Yeah.
get over things. And so there's been a lot of stagnation with the recognition of how important emotional health is. In fact, some people would say we're more afraid of our own emotional inner world that comes about through meditation or through self-reflection than we are afraid of most anything else. But our mind does, like I mentioned earlier, our mind becomes a reflection of our emotional health in many ways. For example, when we're feeling really out of control and we can't turn our mind off, and we're into anxiety and obsessive thoughts or what have you. Generally, just like with anxiety, I say under anxiety, there's always an unresolved emotion. It's not something out there. We don't have a disease. It's not something out there getting us. It's coming from within, and we can learn to at least manage it, if not overcome many of these things that we are dealing with by attending to our emotional health. So they're very closely linked, but also need, in my opinion, their own distinguished treatment.
Right, right. And that reminds me, through the chapters as you work up the chakra, and the seventh is the crown chakra, and you talk about the importance of spirituality. And so, what can you say about that? That's so important to link into gaining emotional health.
Yeah, well, I think it's very important, and a lot of people, whether it's coming out of high school or college and thinking it's cool to just ditch that whole thing that your parents told you about, or when they drive to church or whatever, we come to a lot of conclusions based on very little information, especially when things are forced on us. So I think it's really important for a person to seek and to study and to feel and allow themselves different experiences, and to foster a relationship with a higher power of some sort. And, again, when we try to over control our own lives, and we create a very myopic viewpoint of what is reality, and it separates us from having trust or faith in a bigger picture and a perspective and understanding and having deeper empathy for a situation or another person, and just having a sense of feeling safe in our own lives, that things will work out or what have you. So I think it's really important. And I go so far to say I think it's important to name it as well, just so it's not some vague idea. Call it whatever you want to call it, but have a relationship in that way. It's very grounding. It's equally as grounding as being connected to the earth here.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. And that reminded me, I had gone to a workshop where they were talking about, surrender in our culture seems so weak. But if we can surrender to that higher power, that's really one of the strongest things that we can do to help us go beyond, just what our individual limited beliefs can get us to.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Well, we only have a couple of minutes left in the show, and we were just talking during the break that you have a van tour that you've gone to Florida from New York, and you're going to eventually come to California. And so tell us about this van tour and what you do.
Well, I had a healing center and a retail store, and so I converted that into a van, a Sprinter van you can stand up in. And it's got all of our products. I have a line of products: aura sprays, chakra oils, the meditation CDs, even a facial line, and some really beautiful complementary personal and spiritual care products, crystals and so forth in the van. And to me, it's like it's as much of a movement of inspiration and reminder for people as it is as a way to get my brand and so forth out in the world too. So I go and I do workshops and I go into cities and I do some media events and I open the doors and I sell things and do chakra readings and, just help educate people and inspire people to get on their path.
Right. And so can people see where you're going through either your social media or on your website? How do they know where you are?
Yeah, sure. On Instagram, it's Leah the Modern Sage is the best way, or Facebook, okay. Leah Guy the Modern Sage, and also my YouTube channel, which is my name, Leah Guy. I'll be doing either daily or every couple of days a blog with the van and interviewing experts and spiritualists and authors and musicians and everyone in the van. So it'll be
cool. I love that. That's really cool. Okay, we only have a minute left. I just really quickly want to show people. This is my chickapoo that she is working through, processing her pain and trauma. She has done it to such a point that her chakra are balanced. She is flying like a butterfly, flowers coming down, processing emotion, and that's leading her to peace and joy. And so pick up Leah's book, The Fearless Path, and that can get you on the track to doing that for yourself. So give us one little Scooby bite, one little nutshell that you want to leave people with today.
Well, I think what's going on in our country and our world, I would just say, if you or someone that you know is suffering, and just to encourage them to reach out and get help. There's no shame in finding some help, and that's why I do what I do. And I know there's millions of people, not millions, hundreds, thousands of people that in some capacity or another, I think could give some good assistance, so that we can restore our sense of feeling safe and find the emotional and mental stability in some regard when possible. So.
Right. And do that, work through the process with, people who can help you and not just detach. Right. So awesome. Thank you so much, Leah. This has been a great conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And good luck on your van tour. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, everybody. This has been Unstuck Joy, and we will see you next time.